This is a true story. It's about chickens. And it seems to me that people who know chickens either love them or hate them. Now,
Do you think you could put the microphone closer to your mouth?
Or you could turn it up. I have a soft voice, Rabbi David, so it's harder for people to hear me. So, I'll start again for you. So, chickens. People who know them either love them or hate them. I really, really love them. And this is the story of how I came to love them. I used to live a long time ago in Western Washington, Olympia to be exact. And we lived in an area where everybody had about 5 acres of land. We had a little house, and if you walked uphill from the house, you went past the big garden. A little bit further on was an old, dilapidated chicken coop with the roof falling in, where I had once housed a rooster I had rescued from a bunch of other hens who were trying to peck him to death. He was injured. And then beyond that was a beautiful old barn with weathered cedar boards. On the second story of the barn was my art studio. It had been converted. It wasn't fancy. But on one end of the barn, too, was this deck with stairs that went down the outside. And I looked out from there onto these beautiful, tall Douglas fir trees that went up into the sky and touched the clouds, and cedar trees that were just old and grandfatherly and wise, and then cottonwoods that just bent in the wind, as well as a lot of wild roses, and in the springtime, an absolute avalanche of Scotch broom. We didn't have chickens. We did have visitations of young turkeys, and I would always feed them cracked corn. We also had an escaped peacock from a house a few acres over at one point who also liked the cracked corn. But our neighbor, Melanie, had chickens. Now when we moved in, she had, maybe 6 or 7 chickens and a rooster, Zeus. Now Zeus was absolutely glorious. He was rightly named, except that he lived longer than Moses. This rooster lived for like 10 years. It was unbelievable, and fathered many, many, many babies. Well, one year, Melanie decided she didn't want any more chickens. So she was going up every day and stealing the eggs from her hens. Well, I don't know if you've ever seen a broody chicken, but they're very determined when they're broody, and they get all soft and quiet, and they go to their nest and they hunker down, and they get what Beatrix Potter called soporific. They just, like somebody slipped them a Xanax. They just get all quiet and they tuck their little buns into their nest and they go, and they barely open their eyes. They just kind of wink at you. So her hens stole the nest. When you have 5 acres, there's a lot of places to go. Now, the other hens, who weren't broody, still remembered what eggs were really for. So what they do is every day they would go find these little hens, and they would push them, I watched it happen one day, push them like a hip check off the nest and lay their eggs, which is a much different business because they're wide awake. Now, if you had to lay a watermelon once or twice a day, you'd scream too. You'd hear it across many acres. Well, what happened was after a few weeks, and over the course of about a week and a half, I would be walking back and forth to my studio with my cup of tea in hand, and I would hear beep, 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 beep. And I would look on somewhere on Melanie's property would be a hen, followed by 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 little baby chicks. Melanie was more dismayed as the days passed at how successful her hens had been at stealing the nest. Until one day, as I was walking up to my studio and walking past the old chicken coop, I heard beep, 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 beep. turned, and here's a little golden hen, little tiny thing, with 6 little baby chicks, and she just looks at me like, oh, could you please put out some more food and water? Oh, I got babies here. I turned around and walked back to the house, called Melanie and said, I hate to tell you this, but you have a hen and 6 more chicks in our coop. Oh, no, said Melanie. Those chickens are in your coop. They are your chickens. Great, I said. I've wanted chickens. My partner didn't want me to have chickens. I have chickens. So what eventually happened was Melanie had probably 40 hens and 7 roosters, which is a whole nother story. And over time, as you know, chickens have a pecking order. Well, the chickens who were lowest in the pecking order ended up moving over to our house, along with one rooster, Augustus Caesar. Augustus Caesar was all white, and he had a brilliant red crop with beady gold eyes. He was regal and magnificent, and he loved me. So, and I ended up with about 12 chickens, too. So every day I would come out with my cracked corn in one hand and my tea in the other, walk up to my studio, being trailed by a wild turkey, 12 or 13 chickens, and Augustus Caesar. Now, one day, one of them, I think it was Augustus, decided to follow me up into my studio. And that's really surprising because, you know, we can go like this to get upstairs, but chickens don't have that ability. I don't even think they have knees. So instead, all he did was I hear scrabble, 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 up 15 steps, followed by another 12 hens, up the steps. And then there's one more step into my studio. And the hens ignored my studio altogether. But Augustus loved me. So he would cock and nod. He'd get up there and he'd go. And I'd say, no, stay out of the studio. I know you want me. Next thing I know, he'd be up there and I'd say, no, get down, go back. Now, everybody thinks chickens are dumb, but every time he hopped back down. He was very obedient about it, but he kept trying. So then I have this whole gaggle of hens and a rooster on my deck. And one day, one of them decides to go right up to the edge where they had been roosting. But this time, suddenly she gets an idea. She's looking down. You know what? We're birds. We have wings. We should be able to fly. Now, it's a 2nd-story deck. And if you know how chickens are made, they have these short little wings and these big fat bodies. But they got all excited. We're birds. We can fly. And so they kept one after another going up to the edge. Next one. I'm gonna do it. Go on and on and on. Until finally, my favorite, the only other one I named, Abby, she was the lowest hen on the pecking order. She was beautiful. She was stark gray with little black speckles, and she was so sweet. Abby would be tucked against the door of my studio thinking, y'all be nuts. Would finally kind of get up and go, oh man, I have to do everything. She would walk to the front of the deck and she would get right on the edge and she'd kind of, and finally she would throw herself off. Now, the trajectory is, here's the deck. There's 2 stories down, and the land slopes away. So, you know, chickens, they're pretty heavy. So she would kind of go something like, she'd land, and then she'd go, fluff all her feathers. To which the others would go, really, it's that good? Wow. Wow. And one after another, they would go, and fly off. Get to the bottom and fluff their feathers. Oh, that's good. And finally, Augustus would go. Now, this was a little scary to me the first, actually, several times it happened, because a rooster's like got 4 times the body mass of a hen. And so Augustus's trajectory was more like boom. But remarkably, nobody ever got hurt. They would wait for each other at the bottom, and there would be lots of talking. Oh, that was good. Oh, yeah, did I fly well? Yeah, just see me. Oh, yeah. Let's do it again. And so they would come, and I would hear them until they were all at the top. And you'd think if you want to jump off and you like it, you'd just do it again. No, they would start from the very beginning. And the first hen would go up and go, oh, we can fly, we can fly. I can't do it. We'd go around again and again. They would do this 2, 3, 4 times until they were so exhausted that I would end up with these little piles of feathers on my deck, sleeping, until I went back down to the house, or until they woke up energized and would do it all over again. It was such a joy to me. Day after day, I never got tired. I would stop what I was doing and watch it, time after time after time. And I just love it. And I've shared it with people, and it's made people happy. And so I guess for me, the ending of the story is just that this was over 20 years ago. And this is still one of my best and favorite memories. It always brings me joy. And so it reminds me that oftentimes the simplest things are the things that stay with me and are always there to refresh my spirit when I need it. So I try to look for them now. And I will forever